Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks, where kindred souls gather to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as a February room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for Composite Developments fly rods and fishing accessories. Tech, precision, ingenuity, legacy. Go to cdfishing.us and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's your host, Lauren Carnop, and this is the February Room.
Welcome to the February Room. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Marty Johanson, founder of Composite Developments Rods, all the way from New Zealand. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Marty.
Good morning, Lauren, and thank you. Well, it's morning here, of course. I think it's afternoon over there, and yep, a lovely day here. Lovely winter spring day.
Well, Marty, I know being a founder of Rod Company, you have some fishing stories, and I would love to hear one. Okay,
so a fishing story, I guess, we have to go back to about in the 60s, which is in probably 68, 69, and I guess that was one of my first major trips to Turangi, which is a place that was about four hours north of where I lived in Palmerston North, and an old boy took me up. He taught me how to fly fish, actually, because in Taupo Turangi area you can only fly fish, you can't spin fish, and this is a fast running water river and cold in the winter time, and of course, those days, New Zealand's population was around 2.8 million people and about 80 million sheep. So you went fishing, you never saw people. I mean, it was just on your own. And then this particular morning, was -0. That's not from snow. It's just very cold and the frost and stuff up there in this particular place. And we were fishing a little river called the Hinimoa, actually, this is in the Turangi area, and where the Tongariro is, which you may have heard of, where probably most people from the States come down. They always want to fish the Tongariro because it's fast running and big fish, and you can't see the fish, but of course it's fantastic fishing anyhow. So we into the Hinimoa we go this morning, and it was just down this little drop, and it was just full of fish. And in these days, of course, you could take 10 fish per person. Unlike today, we were fishing for the larder. I mean, that's what we did. We went up there and we would fish for 3 days and try and get 30 fish each to come home with, because we would bottle them, we'd smoke them. And my mum would bottle them, actually, and we would have several jars of trout in the larder for the rest of the year, and that's what we had for lunches on our sandwiches. And so that was the way you did it those days. But of course today it's catch and release most of the time, but you can take 3 fish today. So anyhow, we got into the stream and we lit a fire because it was so cold. We're standing in our waders, and we stand in the middle of the fire to thaw out and then go back out. But we'd take turns at that, and the other guy would go fishing. And then we'd fish this corner, and it was just full of fish. We'd throw rocks into the middle of it to disturb them, because they'd get into this huddle and we'd throw these rocks, and these fish would disperse everywhere. Cast a fly in there, and wham, And we didn't take one fish out of there that was under 5 pounds. And these are rainbow trout, and some magnificent fish in there. So we then thought, well, how are we going to get all these fish out from, because it was about a mile walk back to the car, and so we had to go chop a tree down in a long branch and go collect some flax, which is what we used for string, and tied all these fish onto this branch and then put it between our shoulders and walked out. Well, when we got to the road, there was another car there, and one of the local lads, an old boy, actually came in. He was just parking his car and setting up to go fishing himself, and he couldn't believe the sight when we came out with these fish on between our. And he said, "My God," he said, "you guys have been using dynamite in there." Anyhow, so that's the story of absolute gluttony, I guess, in terms of overdoing it. But that's a true story, and I've got a photo of it. So there was a lot of work to be done when we got home, obviously, back to the batch to to do all the fish and prepare them and hang them in we had safes in those days. We didn't have fridges. A safe was just I don't know what you call it over there, but it's a box with
like a smoker.
No, it's a safe. You hang your fish to dry, but it's out in the open air. But sorry, it's in a box, but with screens on it so the flies can't get in and things like that. Of course, so it's called safe. I don't know but safe, of course, is what you put guns and money in, isn't
it? It's worth something. Is the fishing still as dynamite down there as it was back in the 60s?
It can be, but of course you can't take that many fish. But yes, there's many fisheries in New Zealand. Obviously, the South Island is probably the most famous to Americans that come here because of the clarity of the water and also the stalking of the fish. So that's more of the fishery down there. Whereas in the North Island, it's more deeper and faster flowing water, and you're obviously you're bombing with nymphs. Typically in the Tongariro, for example, you would have a heavy weighted nymph and then a lighter weighted nymph at the end of it. So you'd have two nymphs on, and very hard to cast because you've got to get distance too. So yeah, you are doing a lot of work. But yes, to answer that question, the fishing is right, especially this year. It's very good. In fact, I'm going down in a couple of weeks from Auckland. It's going the other way now. I live north of Tongariro. I used to live south of it. But yes, very good fishing.
What does New Zealand provide that the States do not?
I guess really the size of the fish is a big part of it. I mean, there's a lot of the fish are definitely bigger everywhere than I've personally had in the States. I've always only caught sort of up to 14, 16, 18 inches over there. So I've not had the privilege of catching big rainbows and browns and cutthroats, of course, over there. But we don't have cutthroats here. So the water, I guess, it just has better food and or nutrients. I don't know, but I mean the fish are bigger, maybe not as many as you have in the States in terms of fish, but they're bigger, and that's the South Island, very clear waters, and in the North Island, of course, as I said to you, the deep waters, and they breed in the lakes, and they breed up the rivers, and then they come down the rivers into the lakes, and then they go back up to the rivers to breed again, and so it's just a cycle, which I guess, I mean, the fish from they've come from California originally, the rainbow trout, of course. That was introduced to New Zealand back in the 1800s, I believe. So,
wow, I did not know that.
So they're not a native. The brown trout or the rainbow trout are not natives to New Zealand, of course. They're introduced. So and we have a crab, like a little crayfish, freshwater crayfish, and they particularly like them. So whether that's why they get nice and big, I don't know, but that's certainly the way it is in the North Island. But
so Marty, how did you get into fishing and then decide to be a founder of CD Rods? How did that all come together?
Yeah, well, okay. I started life as a fitter and turner, and did that in New Zealand when I was a young fella, and I decided I didn't like to do that, so I joined a brewery here in New Zealand, and the major beer brewery, and I guess I must have done fairly well because they wanted to send me to the States to go to university, which I did for 3 years in Miami, and then I came home and back to the brewery, and then they said, "Oh, why don't you go back to America and see if you can set up Steinlager over there," which is what I did. And I did that for 2 or 3 years, and living in California, setting up, mostly concentrating in Hawaii and in California. And then I knew I just didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, and I love fishing. So I met this wonderful gentleman called Richard D. Wolf Cantner. He was his father was I think the number 7th flying license in the United States. There's a bit of history there. And Richard worked after the Second World War and during the war, I believe, for the Air Force, or for the government, I guess. He used to be flown out on a Monday morning, early in the morning, in a windowless aircraft into the desert, and worked on the U-2 and the Blackbird. And he was an integral part of that because of the graphites and all the carbon fibre utilisation in the craft. And and after that was developed, and I think it was in 1952 or something, that's when he broke away from there or left there and set up his own company manufacturing sporting goods, and fishing rods was one of them, of course, out of carbon fibre. And so I was lucky enough to meet Richard and his family, who are today are dear friends. I mean, we're like brothers and sisters in San Diego, and we set up a joint company here in New Zealand because he needed to up his production, and it was too expensive in those days. I guess it's just like what happens now where we go to China to get things made. He came to New Zealand way back then. And I was lucky recipient of being with a joint venture with the government, our New Zealand government, who assisted us to set up a manufacturing plant here in New Zealand. So being an engineer, I was able to build a lot of the machinery myself, and we set it up and got going, and I supplied Richard with blanks, which he in turn supplied. I was a contractor in those days to a company called Phoenix Fishing, I think, in the United States, which I think still goes today, believe it or not. And yeah, so Richard sadly passed away, but of course his family's still much alive, but the business has been wound up over there, and but I'm still very, very friendly, as I say, with the family, and they come here and live with us, and we go there and live with them. And they love fishing too, so it's a great arrangement. In a nutshell, that's kind of how I started, and from there we manufactured blanks here in New Zealand, which we sold to a local company in New Zealand here who manufactured into rods, and we exported to Russia, through Europe, South Africa, yes, and the United States, of course, and and then eventually we started making rods. As we could afford to buy the products and finished rods, and then of course, as of today, we now import all kinds of fishing products and distribute along with manufacturing, of course.
Do you feel pretty lucky that you get to do something that reflects your passion for what you love to do?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt of it. That's why I did it. And today, I mean, my son's now taken the business over, and he's very passionate. In fact, he's out there today doing it, the lucky bugger. And he's out fishing, and it's definitely, I mean, I love hunting and fishing, and that's the business I'm in. And if you can do something you like in life and have a great life, which I believe I have, I'm very lucky, feel very, very privileged indeed.
Yeah, I honestly have to say, I think doing this podcast and listening to people's stories is that their job really tries to encompass what they love to do. The fact that you actually have had a job that requires you to go into the office to go fishing as a requirement seems like that would be a lot of anglers' dream.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's the camaraderie, it's the people you meet, and of course the people that fish, especially fly fish, are very similar type people to you. So there's no crap in terms of sorting out the bullshit, from the jelly beans there. I mean, it's the people are very similar to you in most cases. They're like for for nature and for catch and release or whatever, or for the environment is exactly the same. So that's a good start, isn't it? When and they usually like beer too, which is good.
Absolutely, it's so true, right? I feel that as many anglers there are in Missoula, there is as equal amount as breweries. They had to even it out. They're like, every angler needs their own brewery, so we better build them. If you build it, they will come. Probably just like with the CD rods, which is so incredible because you guys also are building some new upcoming rods, the Tri-CD, and those are also made with the composite material. Can you give me a little bit of information about the new rods that you guys are kind of coming up with?
Sure. So Trist was, a name that Tom and the boys came up with, because to try and find a name these days that's not registered around the world is absolutely impossible. So it was TRYCD, Tri-CD, Trist. So that's how we came up with that. But Trist is an idea of Tom's, who is a graduate engineer. He's very, very good at that sort of stuff, and of course he's passionate about this sport. So he knew what he wanted to do, and he's come up with a triangular package that is so easy to just unfold, and you get your pieces out. In the fly fishing side of it, for example, it's 4 rods basically for the price of one. So you're getting one handle, you're getting a 9-foot rod and and a 6 or an 8 weight, or a 10-foot rod in the same. And so you can take this anywhere in the world, and basically you could saltwater fly fish and also freshwater fly fish with the product. And it's so easy. It's 100% graphite, of course, similar, exactly the same sort of construction with the helical winds, etc., that we utilize in the CD rods or our fly rods. So it's exactly the same. That, in fact, it's a far better or superior technology than what we used when we first started some 40 years ago. So, and that's just through refinement of graphite, and also through the technology of wrapping and the accuracy of wrapping, as opposed to what we did way back then, and as I say, 40 years ago. So that's the freshwater side of it. And if you can, the best way to see it is honestly to go online, www.trust.com, and you can see the presentation there of the fly side of it, and also the saltwater side of it. The saltwater side is very exciting because it enables you to take it on the aeroplane, and you've got 3 different rods. You've got a jigging rod, or the top water rod, whatever, or even a fly rod. You can put that in there too. So it's pretty cool. In fact, it's very cool. I think it's got a lot of merit, and hopefully, with all the patents just gone through, I believe there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the States too.
I think it's a sport that's also it's hard to get into because it's such an expensive sport to get into fly fishing. And I think it's kind of nice that this is giving an opportunity for people to go out and go fishing and have 4 rods to be able to experience whatever they want to, and maybe head to New Zealand and just grab 1 rod without having 4 tubes and having security look at you like, what are you doing?
No, it's true, and it's all in one little triangle, and it's a very cool idea, because it just opens up, and they're all just sitting there, and you assemble the rod, and it's very cunning. It's very cunning the way that it goes together, and the actions are honestly a second to none. I believe they're right up there with the best rods in the world. So, and all 4 of them in that class. So, absolutely. A brilliant package, I believe. So, yeah, well done to Tom.
Absolutely. It's crazy because like we talk to other people about CD rods, and everyone always says if it's tested by New Zealanders, it's right. The people from New Zealand are crazy, and they test the crap out of their stuff.
Well, we've got. Yes, I mean, obviously, just to testing the rods themselves. I mean, one of my old tricks was driving the car over them, and to see if they would withstand the pressure of it, because one of the biggest things is breakage in fly rods, as I'm sure you'd probably be aware. And so it's incredible how they break, and how easily they can break through trees, through windows and car doors, and blah, blah, blah. But one of the tests that we used to do was we showed driving my car over the blank to withstand that compression. So that's pretty cool. And then of course bending, we would get somebody on the end and bend it and load the rod normally and try and break it with gloves on and obviously glasses and just doing the whole bit. But no, couldn't. That's not a fly rod by that. That was a jig rod, but just that's the sort of things we do to test, test the rods. The fly rod itself there's nothing like getting out there and catching a big fish and landing it. Like right now, we've developed some new rods for the Twizel area down in the South Island, where they catch these mega fish. I mean, these are 40 to 50 pound trout, rainbow trout and brown trout. I mean, they're Goliaths. They're tanks, and they're just fish that they've got that big through feeding the pellets in these canals. These are man-made canals that they've got salmon farms, and of course the salmon farm food flows out, and of course these trout are down the canal, and they're just sitting there gobbling these pellets up, I guess, that escape the salmon farms, and they get nice and fat. Well, these things are real slugs, I can tell you. I mean, but they fly. I mean, you're talking about flying, playing a fish on a rod very similar to a fly rod. These rods that we make are 9 foot long, and they cast what they call, they use all kinds of baits, but mostly eggs, imitation of egg, and they roll what they call egg roll, and they roll them along the bottom by walking down the straight canal. And and they bounce them along the bottom and pick up these humongous fish. And seriously, I mean, there's several fish over 20 pounds. I mean, that's, you wouldn't expect not to catch a 20 pounder plus. But to catch a 40 pounder plus is not, so it's a bit more. We've got a guy that works for us who's he's caught 3, and he's kind of the guru of catching these large fish. So yeah, so there's a good test right there, I can tell you, because the bend they put on the rod trying to bring these things in, and because they go downstream and they've got power because they're 40 pounders. So you can imagine the bend on the rod and the guys trying to stop them.
Jeez, what's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
My own's only 9 pound. I've never fished the canal, so it's probably not my thing so much. I just love the rivers and the natural. I just love being out there in nature and doing it. I don't even have to catch fish. I can just sit there and watch, listen to the birds. The bird song and down here is just amazing in the mornings and stuff.
How often are you fishing, Marty?
And freshwater fishing, not so much nowadays. I'd probably get down 2-3 times a year. I go down to Turangi. Usually that's where I go because I enjoy it down there. That's the old stomping ground I was telling you about, with where I caught all those fish. And I've been going every year ever since. And then I fish, of course, a lot on the ocean. So probably every week or 2 weeks I go out.
When you're fishing, what are you using for as a fly?
As far as flies are concerned, for wet stream fishing, I'd be using my favourite, all-time favourite would have to be the red setter. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Have you heard of a red setter?
I haven't. No. Describe it.
Well, red setters, it's made from a dog, obviously the red setter dog. It's their fur. And it's just orange head with the brown hair going back off it as a streamer. I'm not a fly tyer, never have been, never interested.
It's okay. You have a rod company, so I think you can get away with not tying flies.
Yeah, I just find it a lot easier to go, pay somebody else to go buy them, and I had mates that loved to do it, so I just supporting them. So that's what you did. But
and then I was going to say though, Marty, because I actually was kind of curious about it as we kind of continue to talk, because you've started this company, and what do you see is changing in the fly fishing industry?
Well, I guess it's a very interesting question. If we start right from the start in terms of fishing rods, I think that's really an interesting question. Where's that gone? Well, when I started, it was cane and fiberglass in New Zealand anyhow, and graphite had only just started. And as I said to you, that's because Richard Cantner was the instigator of that way back. I mean, he had to be, because they were the first guys to be using graphite after the war, and or during the war too, of course. But after the war, it's when they put it into application, and with a blackbird, and then of course then on to sporting products. So that's been an interesting thing, because there hasn't been much more other than graphite and boron. We had boron there for a bit, which we utilised, but it's still graphite. Which I guess, how far can a rod go, in terms of being light and powerful and the actions, and it's incredible all these variations we're getting every year. Lot comes out with this and that and whatever, but still does the same job at the end of the day. And of course they're lighter and a whole lot sturdier and obviously stronger. But and in terms of the fishery itself, obviously the pressure that the fishery is under with regards to the number of people doing it, the farmlands, and the building and construction, and that's all having an effect on the environment, which is something that we here in New Zealand, we're all very strongly voiced on this, of course, and of course the farmers are too. And the farmers, the majority of them are all trying to do a good job and keeping, their streams, clean and green, but of course they can't stop a cow or two or sheep going through it, and when that happens, that's when shit hits the fan, so to speak, and with regards to the colour of the water and what happens. So that's the pressures and things that are happening here, and I think almost everywhere in the world. So we all have to look at and protecting that environment and saving it for the future generations and coming through, which is I hold dear to my heart. And I certainly want my sons and their kids to be able to do what I did and have a life like we did, to catch a fish and to walk the streams and listen to the birds and have a camp out like we did in the States. So I think that's just amazing to be able go down a river and set up camp and you know, have some fun at night and clean up in the morning and hop back into your boats, fish all day and tell a joke or two. It's just, you know, that's, to me, is the epitome of life.
Yep, absolutely. You can't be bringing any more of those rainbows though on sticks, and those times might have passed. But Marty, if people want to learn more about you and the company, especially over in New Zealand, what's the best way for them to reach you and Tom over at CD Rods New Zealand?
Well, obviously the website tells you a lot. www.cdrods.co.nz, or as I said to you before, trust.com is obviously where you can see everything about the company. But if you're coming this way and to New Zealand, and if there's anything we can help and direct you in the right way, we certainly know everybody in the industry and throughout New Zealand with regards to guiding. We have a lot of pros that work for us. When I say work for us, they associated with us and using our gear, and we obviously support them all throughout the country. So there's definitely space to learn there, or if you want to write directly to us, I mean, as I said, go to the website, and we're writing to people all the time to help them out, and of course, we have our agents in the States there, which you guys know more about. Well, obviously, Justin knows more about us than most people, so he can relay the information you want to.
For the inside scoop on the fly patterns we've discussed with our guest, check our blog for Flies of the February Room. If you would like to enter the February Room, shoot us an email at info@cdfishing.us. Also, remember to subscribe, share, and, if we've earned it, give us those 5 stars. Thanks for dropping by, and remember to go fishing.